our community of practice. I want to begin by saying how impressed I am with the thoughtful responses that you've given during our first 2 weeks in the community, and I'm hopeful that that will continue. So without further ado, we're going to get started today. We have a full agenda, and again, these interim webinars the purpose of them is really to just introduce you to some of the content that you'll be working on in the time between our next webinar. And today we're also going to review some of the things that came as a result of the discussions that you had and continue to have. So this morning we are going to review session 1. As I said, there were some very interesting comments and questions as a result of those activities. And then we have a guest speaker, GEST, Kim Gablik. If you knew how many times I reviewed this before I sent it to you, before I sent it to Tony, it surprises me that I had another error. We're going to look at session 2 activities, and then we're going to take a review of course sites again to show you where everything's located and to see how some of the areas are going to look a little bit different moving forward. Next slide. So one of your activities during the first part of this community of practice was to review the agency checklist. The checklist was a compilation of several different pieces of information that have been around now since WIOA, even before WIOA was signed into law. But as I reviewed your discussions and as I reviewed your responses, there were a number of themes that came out as common concerns. So there were some of you that thought your agency was doing really well and was on top of all of these items, which is great because moving forward, then you might be able to have more input into what we're going to do as a result of this activity. One of the purposes of a community of practice is to address needs as they arise during the sessions. So what I did was really look at your responses, your questions, your concerns, and I wanted to have a little discussion about that now, and then moving forward, how we can take your concerns and really implement them into our discussion boards. Next. So the 3 areas that I thought were themes through your responses were the questions and the comments about memorandum of understanding, the use of local labor market information, and staff time for implementation of WIOA. So I think that the first 2 are areas that we can contribute our expertise, our thoughts, and our ideas to. The third one is one of those areas that we probably are not going to be able to have a lot of impact on at this time. So we're going to leave that for another time. But I did want to talk a little bit about the Memorandum of Understanding. So if we can go back to the previous slide, please. So you'll see, and Tony, can you point to the MOU question at the bottom? Down, 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 with the sub right there. So the question was, or the checkbox was, our program's Memorandum of Understanding with PA CareerLink and WIOA partners includes services to be provided through the CareerLink, services to be provided by you, the provider, methods of referral, the duration of the MOU, and shared costs and resources that will support these costs. So my experience and your responses kind of led me to believe that many of you have these informally in place. In other words, it's not necessarily a memorandum of understanding. A memorandum of understanding is putting all of this in writing so that everybody knows what you're saying you are responsible for. So it goes beyond a letter of support. It's actually outlining many different things, and these 5 are just examples of those. So if you can move to the next slide, Tony. What we're going to do in this next 2 weeks is really put up a discussion board about these memorandum of understanding. And again, those of you who have said that your agency is really on the ball with all of these topics, I hope you'll be able to contribute to this particular topic, because it is an area that we all have concerns about, particularly with the changes that are being implemented through WIOA. The next one is the local labor market information. So one of the things that I learned from your questions and your comments were that, yes, you understand that the labor market information is important, but you're not really quite sure what you can do or should be doing with it. So fortunately for us here in Pennsylvania, we have a fantastic site that Labor and Industry supports for local labor market information, and that is the WorkStat site. This is an area, local labor market information is an area where your partnerships with your workforce development board and your career link operators are so important, because this information needs to be real time. It can't be something that you get through ONET, even though ONET has great resources for specific purposes. It's not real time and it's not local. So my suggestion is to contact your local workforce development board or your PA career link to find out where you can find this information that is most recent. But we're going to use the second forum, the local labor market information, to really share additional resources and to share some promising practices about what you're doing with the local labor market information in your program. So I'm pleased that, I'm really excited that there are areas that all of you feel, or a number of you feel, are areas where you need to grow or at least find out more information. So this will be something that's an adjustment to our original outline, but again, that's really the purpose of a community of practice. Next slide, please. So the other area were the labor and industry white papers. Does anybody have any comments that they want to make right off the cuff about those? Those were, some of you had ones that were quite long and lengthy, and other of you were kind of short and to the point. But again, these were developed by input from stakeholders across workforce development, including Title II. So it was just kind of the luck of the draw. If you were in an audience where they were looking for participants to help to create these white papers. I think I mentioned to you that I was part of the Career Pathways group, and we probably had about 30 people in that group. So all of the sections, all of the subgroups were quite large. I have now put all of the white papers into course sites, so if you're interested in reading about what the other topics were and what the other recommendations were, every one of them, if the recommendations are indeed put into the state plan, every one of them will have some impact on the services that you develop and that you deliver. So while it's not a requirement that you read any more of the white papers, you may want to do it just to be informed and to see what are possible implications for adult education. Again, these white papers were developed to inform the state plan. Whether or not or to what degree the information in them will be used still remains to be seen. Does anybody have any comments or anything that you feel strongly about as you were reading those? Okay, so if you do, and if you do continue to inform yourself by reading some more of the white papers, that discussion board will continue to be available for you to post your reflections and any questions or comments that you have regarding the additional information. I did want to say that in reading your responses, some of you talked about the industry partnerships and how that work might inform the way we deliver services. Industry partnerships, just a little bit of history. So they've been around a number of years, and that's a sector strategy. Under Governor Rendell's administration, they were heavily funded. They were given quite a bit of money in each of the regions, or not each of the regions, but in many of the regions, to develop these partnerships among the sectors. And the purpose of them was to bring together employers. For example, if the partnership was around manufacturing, it might be in one workforce development area, or it might cross different areas. But the idea was that those manufacturers would all have common needs. And the money that was given to support those common needs could be used to pay for incumbent worker training. So there was little room for adult education to be a part of that, because the skills that they were training for were typically of a higher level. That's not to say that there's not a place for adult education, or there wasn't a place for adult education in those industry partnerships. I believe when they were up and running and quite robust and strong, our message wasn't the same as it is moving forward. It maybe in areas it was, but again, they were but they were implemented for higher level skills. The other thing about the industry partnerships is that all of the training was required to be industry led. In other words, when the partnerships got together, it was not intended to have educators at the table, because the industry partnerships did not want to hear from our services, particularly the ones that were going to be at a cost. So they wanted the interactions to come from the employers to go out to the educators to say, can you help us with this problem? Not for the educators to come and say, hey, we can do this, this, and this. Is this something you need? So that's a little bit of the history. However, the funding for those industry partnerships continues to lessen and lessen and lessen. So they are not as strong as they were at one time, and they're not as widespread as they were at one time. So that's why the sector strategies recommendations, for those of you who looked at that white paper, spent so much time talking about those industry partnerships. Those of you who were reviewing the career pathways white paper, I do want to say that there is another white paper in the group, in the ones that have been posted now, and that is directed towards serving individuals with barriers to employment. Serving individuals with barriers to employment was one of the subgroups of these WIOA work groups. And that group actually created 4 different white papers looking at different topical areas. So of all of the white papers that were developed, those serving individuals with barriers to employment included our students in particular. So those might be some that you would be interested in reading as well. In the governance white paper, some of the recommendations, even though they repeated them, were not new to WIOA. They were actually part of WIA, and they are being addressed again, maybe in the hopes that the recommendations would come through more strongly through this iteration of the workforce development legislation. Next slide. Okay, so at this time, I've asked one of our participants to talk to you a little about her experience with partnering and planning in her region. Kim Gavlik is from Luzerne County Community College. Kim is also one of our, along with Joe Tokar, who's also on the webinar, one of our Career Pathways classroom coaches. Kim is responsible for the development and the ongoing facilitation of their regional Career Pathways team. Luzerne County Community College, the Luzerne Schuylkill region, was one of our early implementers of our Career Pathways technical assistance. And at that time, we had 2 regions that morphed their coalition into real career pathways teams rather than, I'm using air quotes, just a coalition. So I've asked Kim to come and talk to you about who her partners are on that team, what they do, what some of the challenges are, and what some of the benefits are for building this kind of collaborative community versus a coalition versus trying to do this on your own. So I'm going to step back from the microphone and let Kim take it from here.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Kaylin, for asking me to speak this morning. I just wrote down a couple of notes trying to keep my thoughts in order about what you were asking of me. And when I was trying to review back, what has been the process for us around career pathways, and it is like what you just described. We came on board probably like 2011 doing the tracking forms for career pathways and looking at what kind of evidence we had around our students, being successful and moving on to post-secondary ed or gaining employment. And because of that, part of the expectation was that we would have a team that would help guide this this whole process. So we had invited our in-house people together. When I say in-house, I mean like our community college staff, my supervisor, the workforce community development vice president, Sue Spry, was very interested in participating in any conversations that we had. And what we initially did was we would set up a monthly face-to-face meeting here at our community college. And I invited anyone who had been working with us, previously, referring students to us. I knew that I needed to have the CareerLink administrators involved, and I also wanted to see if we could get any community action agencies involved. Initially, when we started all of this, one of the community action agencies were receiving funds to support career pathways with their welfare clients. So they willingly joined our team as well, and we had, our initial meetings were a lot of conversations around those referrals, the barriers that those clients were up against, how we can help them, and that kind of thing. It's kind of evolved now over the last couple of years to not me talking as much. I do, provide information, but really our partners, I give them an opportunity to share whatever they have going on with their agencies. I have administrators from the Luzerne and Schuylkill Career Links, and they both attend regularly our meetings, either over conference call or face-to-face. One of the administrators is also a member of the workforce development system, so she kind of serves a dual role there. I have the youth council director from the WIB as well, and I have several staff from the community college that help us and kind of we're all kind of working on similar goals in different ways. We have a KEYS program that works with adults who want to come into the community college who are receiving welfare. So their program director serves and provides information about what's going on with their program. We also, our community college is in a consortium with two other colleges, and we receive funds through the TACT grant. I do not know what TACT stands for, but in essence, in my mind, it feels like an adult education program for higher level, for higher ed. They work with technology programs. This year they're working with the welding, the diesel mechanics, and the advanced manufacturing students. They're providing contextualized remediation for them. They're providing career counseling for those students. And I see us really, I felt that we really needed to have a connection with that program. Hearing and seeing all the things that are in WIOA, it is just exactly the kind of thing that TACT is doing. They're just receiving funds from labor and industry, we're receiving funds from Title II. So I work very closely. All of the TACT programs are under the same Workforce and Community Development division here at the community college. So we have connections there. I also invite some of my adult education instructors and case managers to join in the conversation and provide updates on what we're doing in the classroom and what our workforce preparation activities are like. Because I really want as this year, well, this past year progressed, with WIOA, I really wanted to have an impact on the career links, and I wanted them to understand what we do in Title II. How does it impact what they're doing at the career link? So, the purpose of our meetings has evolved over time. But in the essence, it's still to talk about career pathways. But it's in terms of what services are available, what's needed. We do talk a little bit about labor market, what are the employers looking for, and those conversations are always good to inform our adult ed staff, and we start to try and get some common language amongst our programs, because I might say an IEP, and that might mean something different to a career link staff person than it does to an education person. So I usually, go through a meeting giving updates on anything that is new regarding our services. We've spent some time looking at, some of the documentation that we're looking at for this COP. We've looked at in our career pathways team meetings. And, then they all give it an update. All of the partners that are there give an update on what's happening in their programs. Some of the benefits of all of this really has, we all know what's going on for the most part. I think it has been a catalyst for strengthening our position in the career links. When recently our Title I provider changed in Luzerne County, and the career link were, through their previous Title I provider, they were running their own adult ed GED classes. Well, I think because of the partners, and I don't know if I can speak for the career link staff or not, but I feel like because we've had these conversations ongoing, they understand who we are, they understand what we do, they stopped running those adult ed programs on their own and said, well, why are we duplicating services? Exactly, why are you? So it became, I think, we came to the forefront in their minds much more quickly than I feel if we hadn't been having these conversations. So they started looking to us in part because, they know who we are, they know my staff, we go in there, we do GED information sessions, they know what kind of process, that we could go through for referrals. So everything kind of started reigniting for us, or reigniting our partnerships there. And actually, I was just recently asked to present at one of the Career Link staff kind of kickoff meetings for they have a lot of new staff now because of the Title I provider, so they asked me to come and talk just about career pathways to their staff. And I gave them a little update about everything else we did, so in case there were, for the staff that were new. But, I mostly kind of stuck with the career pathways and what does that mean for us. I think that career pathways in essence is still kind of, I think, evolving, and the term itself is still a little hazy in some of our minds, and I'm hoping this year that we can come to a consensus about what that really means. What is career pathways? What does it mean in our community? What does it mean for our students, for the partners, clients? What does it mean, in essence, for everybody? So, I think I get a lot of positive feedback, from the meetings. They're always like, oh, a Friday afternoon, really? But when they leave, they're like, oh, I'm so glad that we take this time, to have these meetings, because then we all just kind of go with a little bit more information. And if we didn't meet like this, I feel like we wouldn't have all of those pieces. I wouldn't know for sure what was happening in all the other areas that we really should know about. And it's been a process, but I think it's really been helpful for our program, and I'm glad to see that everyone else feels that, it is a benefit. And I think that's everything I have to share, unless there's questions.
Kim, how often did you say you meet?
We were meeting once a month. Now we've backed off to every other month just because there wasn't as much happening. But I feel like if we did need to meet again more often, I think everybody would be willing to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. This is Kaylin again. I did want to say that, so you might need some time to think about what Kim had to say, and she has actually agreed to answer your questions in a discussion board that we'll have up for the rest of this week. So if anything comes up between now and Friday, or even beyond Friday, that you want to ask Kim about, she is more than happy to help out with some of those answers. I did want to say that I asked Kim in particular about this to help with this because they did create a true career pathways team. So back in 2011, when PDE selected 8 different regions to try to pilot this career pathways initiative for adult education, we had kind of recommended this particular approach. And what we found, what the experience turned out to be, was that it was difficult to do this regionally when there were multiple adult education providers. Because what we found was that in some of the larger workforce development or areas, or not even the larger ones, but just where there were multiple partners, some of them had Title II partners that, some of them had post-secondary provider partners that others didn't, and some of them worked with some community action agencies, some community-based organizations that others didn't, and the groups were too large to be effective. So Kim's group, because Kim is the only funded provider, now she does have subcontracts, but Luzerne County Community College is the only funded provider in that workforce development area. Her partners are just her partners. In the areas that have 4, 3, 4, 5 adult ed providers, in some cases, their partners were unique to themselves, and the other adult ed providers may or may not have seen a reason to interact with them. So I don't think it is insurmountable because we are moving, one of the things that WIOA is very clear about is this needs to be done regionally. It's how do we do this? So the other area that has a true career pathways team is up in the northern tier, and again, they are a single funded provider. Now we have numerous coalitions that meet, and the definition of the coalition has somewhat changed, or people have different definitions for their coalition. So one of the things that you'll be doing during the next 2 weeks is really investigating whether or not you have a coalition in your region and what is the purpose of that coalition. Is it just the adult education providers who get together to discuss their services, to try to coordinate their services, or are you including workforce development partners like folks from the CareerLink or the Workforce Development Board, or are you including some post-secondary providers too and some community-based organizations to move toward a true career pathways team that Kim just described? And I will say that I attend Kim's meetings either in person or by phone every chance that I get, because it helps me to understand particularly what's going on in that region, as well as what are some best practices. Now, one of the things that Kim didn't mention is that their Workforce Development Board doesn't have a true Title II voice from one of the day-to-day providers of adult education. So they don't have that go-between that some of you have, or some of you are fortunate enough to have, with a Title II representative in the Workforce Development Board. So this kind of gives them a backdoor into the operations of the board and gives them a voice to the board, which they may not have had without having these particular kinds of meetings. So again, think about what questions you have, think about what comments you have for Kim, and let's use our discussion board to address those. Thanks, Kim. Okay, next slide, please. So during this next session, we do have, I made a cheat sheet for you so that you have a place to record your answers. And some of the questions are what you see on the screen now. Who is your board staff? What committees does your board support? Who's your Title II representative? I know we looked at that last time, but some of these questions get to be a little bit more in depth. And does your region have a coalition? And what's the purpose? So these are just a smattering of the questions. There are more questions like this, but it's a way for you to start to understand how all of this system works. Because we tell you, or the advice that you get, or the direction that you get is go out and make these partnerships, and in many cases, people aren't even sure who they're asking. You know, we talk a lot about partnering with the Workforce Development Board. Well, the board is typically made up of 19 to 40 different individuals. Is that who you're supposed to be partnering with? Are you supposed to be talking to those people, or are you supposed to be talking to the staff that supports that organization? Because I'll tell you the truth, my experience as a Title II representative on our Workforce Development Board is that the other board members really aren't the people that you need to talk to. All right, we do an annual presentation to that entire board, and they get their information that way. But in our coalition, we talk to the staff to the board, the people that are doing the day-to-day operations, not the folks that are coming to a meeting quarterly or working on different kinds of subcommittees that may meet quarterly as well. So I think that that's a misconception, or not necessarily a misconception, but how does it work in your region? So when we say partnering with the board, does that mean the 19 to 25 individuals that sit and meet, or does it mean the staff that supports the activities of the region? So you'll see when you look at this activity sheet, and that will be in course sites, you'll see how to start building your own cadre of information, so that when the opportunity does arise, and you're probably going to need to create these opportunities yourself, just like Kim explained, that you know who the people are that you want to invite to your table, so to speak. Next slide, please. So we want to go to course sites and really look at what the expectations are for this next 2 weeks. And Tony, if you can go to the next slide, it kind of outlines the activities for session 2. So we're going to participate with questions and comments to Kim's discussion board, which is Ask Kim. And again, Kim has been gracious enough to say that she will respond for the duration of this week. So if anything comes up, or if you have any burning questions right now that you're interested in asking her, please do. I know that this group contains a number of administrators, but it also contains a number of instructors that are participating. And my experience has been, when regions have coalition meetings, it's typically the administrator that participates, and in many cases, the instructor doesn't have privy to the information that goes on in a coalition. So this is a great opportunity for you as instructors to begin to become more informed about the structure of the region, the expectations, and how you can contribute either directly or indirectly through your administrator to the workforce development system. So the activity sheet will be in course sites. So as an agency, those of you who are working together with other staff members, please complete the activity sheet and email me a copy by November 13th. Again, we'll use the information from that to help generate part of our discussion during our next webinar. And then using the same information from the activity sheet, we're going to use the new method again. What was something that you knew? What was something that is new to you? And what questions do you have, or what questions did that generate in your mind as you completed that activity sheet? As I had mentioned previously, we're going to develop a forum for using local labor market information. And we do have some information on our website, the Career Pathways tab of the Adult Education Resources site, that I will direct you to. And I'm also going to ask another staff member from our project, Angela Kennis, to get on our board and give you some information as well through that about things that she has developed, information that she uses. And one of the things that we can do as a project is come to your agency and work with your staff and give you some opportunities to practice using local labor market information in your discussions with partners, as well as helping to inform instruction for your career pathways. The other board that we're going to have is the MOU experience. Again, that was one of the themes that came out of your checklist, and I want to give you an opportunity to be more direct with your questions that you have, and also give those of you who said that you're really good with these kinds of things, give you, or your agency is on pretty solid ground with this, give you an opportunity to help to inform the rest of the group. So one of the things that I also want to do with that MOU experience is share some of your concerns with the Division of Adult Education at the Department of Education. So this is a forum for you to ask questions. Some of the questions we're going to be able to answer among ourselves. Some of the questions I might be able to contribute to. Other questions are questions we're not going to be able to answer. And those are the kinds of things I believe that the folks in Harrisburg need to know about. They need to know what your questions are, particularly those of you who are instructors that don't necessarily have the opportunity to ask the questions that might affect the way that you provide instruction. So when there are questions that arise that are things that you can't share among yourselves, and I really can't offer any input into the answers to them, those are the ones that I want to take back to the folks in Harrisburg so that they know what your questions are, so that when they're doing their planning at the state level, these are our concerns as adult education providers. Because quite honestly, you're the conduit to the students. You're the folks that need to be heard about where your concerns are. So those are what the expectation is for the next 2 weeks. And you'll see some of the activities I would like to be able to wrap up by the end of this week, but most of them are at the end of next week. And number 6 and number 7, ongoing participation in the community discussions, and the culminating activity, what action steps will you implement as a result of this community of practice? So again, the checklist was to help you to begin thinking about where you need to go, but I'm wondering is as we're progressing with this and as you are learning new things and bringing more things out into the open, it might change even the way that you answered the checklist. So your teams have no assignments during this session. The assignment you're going to be working just with your agency and not necessarily with the larger group, or I'm sorry, the 3 teams that we used for the WIOA white papers during the last session. We will bring that group together again during our last activities, but for right now, we'll just put that group on hold. That you're welcome to have intra-agency conversations through those discussion boards. However, none of your assignments are key to the completion of this session's activities. Does anybody have any questions about this at this time? Okay, so I would like to, if Tony can let me bring up my screen, I want to take a look at course sites because there are going to be things that look a little bit differently. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Tony, can you see my screen?
I can, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Then I'm going to assume that everyone can see my screen. So I don't know how often you check. I have put up some announcements. I announced a few things through the announcements. Again, that's not where the bulk of your information is going to be, but there have been some new things that were posted on there. I do want to begin by looking at the content area, because that's going to look a little bit different. So as you see now, this is what has been up all week, or I'm sorry, since our last session. At the bottom, I've created two folders. The folders are going to serve, just like your computer, as a place where multiple documents will be stored. So if we look at the WIOA workgroup white papers, and I open that screen, during our webinar I mentioned that all of the white papers are now posted. You have no direct responsibility to reading additional white papers. However, as I had said earlier, it might be in your best interest to look at some of these to see what people are saying or recommending to the Department of Labor and Industry and those developing the state plan, what the role of Title II adult education may look like moving forward. So the ones that we looked at during our last session were the sector strategies, career pathways, and the governance white paper. You'll see that career link operations has been added, performance accountability, and this was the group that looked at taking into consideration low-level learners, like the people that come to our programs, people with physical and mental challenges, those who are non-native English speakers, or in a group called Service to Individuals with Barriers to Employment. So you'll see that that particular subgroup has 4 papers that they submitted themselves. So they submitted a paper on career pathways, system linkages, programs of study, and performance. And the only other one that would be new then is the youth services white paper, which again, you know, many of our programs have out-of-school youth that are either in your programs through a coordinated effort or may just be put there because you are providing the service. How does that look in your agency? We're going to look at that during our next session, but the youth services is really an important issue because the funding for this particular population has been increased enormously under WIOA, as well as the parameters for those who fall into this category. So these are the white papers, and they can be found in this particular folder, which is a new way of organizing the documents. You'll also see that Session 1 contents is a folder. So by the end of the day, all of the individual documents will be moved from this area into the folder for Session 1, and your new documents that you will need for this particular assignment group will be what you'll see as individual documents. So it's just a little bit of a change in the way that we're going to be looking at the content area. So in here you'll see your assignments, you'll see the activity sheet, and you'll also see a compilation of the questions that you were interested in asking the Title II provider. So what I did was, I'm sorry, the Title II representative to the Workforce Development Board. What I did was take all of your questions and put them into one document for you to see what other people are asking. I know we did it in the discussion board, but with so much activity in there, I wanted you to get an easy way to see what some of your questions are. So the other thing I'm going to do, which I have not done yet, is really come up with the compilation of the questions that you had in the new queue about Title II and WIOA, because that's the area that I was just talking about. Some of those questions I think that you can answer among yourselves. Some of them are questions that I might have some input in, but I believe that a number of them at this point probably can't be answered. But if the folks in Harrisburg know what you're thinking and what your concerns are, then those are the types of things that they can address moving forward. One of the things that I did see as a theme of those particular questions was the implications of the Workforce Development Board reviewing proposals. And again, my first response to that is, okay, who's going to review them? Is it the 20 people that actually sit on the Workforce Development Board? Is it a subcommittee of the board, or is it going to be the staff that supports the board activities? Again, that hasn't been addressed. That hasn't been answered, and I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. But when I was reading your questions, that was one of the areas that kept repeating itself, was what are we going to do to have the board review our proposals? They are reviewing the proposals to see the alignment to the regional plan. That is what they're charged with looking at. How do what you propose to do, how does that align to the regional plan? So the first thing that comes to my mind is I need to know what's in the regional plan. Or how else am I going to propose services that align to that regional plan? The second thing that comes to my mind immediately is how can I contribute to that regional plan? How can I talk to those that are developing the regional plan and talk to them about the services that we provide and how we can help support the activities of the region, particularly as it refers to or as they relate to career pathways. So that's what folks on the Workforce Development Board are going to be reviewing when it says that they'll be reviewing proposals. They'll be reviewing how your services align to the local plan. So at this point, if you are not in communication either through your coalition or through your individual agency, if you're not in any kind of communication with the Workforce Development Board, Workforce Development Board staff, your Title II representative, then it's time to start thinking about, boy, we need to get on the stick, because it's the regional plan that is going to be important for this particular activity. So the regional plans have to relate to the state plan. The state plan has not been developed. All right? So they're working on that at this time. These white papers were going to support, or were going to be looked at as part of the state plan. Labor and Industry requested these groups be formed. They staffed the groups. They were there at every one of the meetings looking for information for the state plan. So all of this fits into this web of activity that we're a part of. Once the state plan is developed, the regional plans then need to align to the state plans. So the regional plans, you know, people might be talking about them, people might be thinking about them, but they really need to see what's in that state plan before they can finalize the regional plans. Regional plans are going to include the activities of Title II. Your Title II proposals then are expected to align with that regional plan. So if we would make a graphic of it, I mean, it's something that we can put on paper and we can see how all of this fits together. And quite honestly, and if anybody that has heard me talk about any of this all along, this is not a hard thing to do on paper. We can make graphics, we can have arrows, we can have bubble sheets, we can have all of these things that show this is how this is supposed to work. But this activity is this is difficult work. Regional planning, interactions, those of you who have, you know, time and time again tried to work within the workforce development system and come up to roadblocks, or those of you who time and time again have tried to work with the workforce development system and had smooth sailing all the way through it, it's going to look different in each one of the regions. But that's why, you know, that's why I wanted to propose this kind of particular group, so that you can start now looking at who are the people we need to be talking to and what's the purpose of our conversation. So because that was such of such an interest in that new queue was the board review of the proposals, I wanted to get that out early on, that's how this all looks. That would be the flow chart of the purpose of our group, the purpose of participating with the workforce development system, and the purpose of their review. Now, it's my understanding that they are not going to be able to have really, they're going to recommend to the Department of Education. The Department of Education, it is my understanding, will still have the ultimate decision through however their, you know, whatever their process is going to be. The boards will not be decision makers. they will be recommending and making recommendations. And that process has not been at all delineated yet. That's not ready for rollout. Is it going to be a specific part of the proposal that they'll be looking at? Again, that's all in development right now. But that is the 30,000-foot description of how this is going to look. Then I wanted to take another look at the discussion areas, where you'll see that we have a couple new areas. The first one is Ask Kim. Those are questions for Kim and her experience with her Career Pathways team. Now that we know about what the regional planning is supposed to look like, how does a group like this help you to have a voice in what is being planned? With your activity sheet, what's new in Q, the forms for local labor market information, and the form for the MOUs. So you'll see that all of the other forums are still here. They will still be available for you for ongoing participation. And you'll know if new information has been added in this blue area. So you'll see that mine are all zeros. That means that I've read everything that is new to the board. When something new is put in as either a reply or a new thread, then I'll see a 1 in this area. So to reply to, if I want to give some information about my MOU experience, I'm going to open that particular area, and then I would create a thread. And when I put on create a thread, it gives me a place to put a title, and then my response and my information. I click submit, and then it goes out for everyone to see. To reply to something that's already been, sorry, I want to go back one more, something that's already been discussed, and we'll look at an example under new Q. I can see Barb's response, which was Title II in WIOA. That was what she put in the title area. Here is Barb's response, and then if I want to reply to Barb's response, I just can pick reply. If somebody, and that's also a place where I can edit. So if you see when you're reading, which I don't do enough, a spelling error or something you want to correct, you have to hover over that to see how to edit the response. So if it doesn't look like there's a place to reply, just hover over these down at the bottom and you'll see the pop-up that allows you to reply to the information. Does anybody have any questions or comments about our Blackboard group, our Blackboard area, our course sites area? I know this is, a new way of doing this. Some of this may be completely new to folks, but I think we're doing a fabulous job with it. And I really commend your effort and your thoughtful responses to everything that we've been doing. So, Tony, can we go back to the PowerPoint? Okay, so those are your assignments. After today, these will be up. I want to give everybody a chance to look at those last documents. It's just going to be a little bit easier for you to access them today if you want to finish some things up rather than putting them in the folder and having to go that way. So this will be available first thing in the morning. And can you please advance the slide? Oh, is that the last slide?
Yeah, I was just about to say, that's the last one.
Oh, okay. Well, then, does anyone have any questions while we're live?
Kaylin, I do have a question in that our subcontractor is in a different Workforce Development Board. I'm basically covering 2 areas. And do you recommend me doing this for both areas, or concentrate on the area that I'm within?
Yeah, is this Barb?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think you're unique with that, possibly. So the buck stops with you, right? The buck stops with you as the funded provider. Now, if you're comfortable with your subcontractor being the voice for your agency, which is what it would be, right? Your subcontractor is going to be the voice for your agency. If you're comfortable with that, then I would say let that agency carry on as, you know, as the partner. If it were me, I would want to be involved with it myself. I would think that maybe, you know, maybe you as the oversight agency knows more about what you're fiscally able to do supporting that subcontractor. May know more about WIOA than the subcontractor. So while the subcontractor is the you know, the day-to-day operation, you as the oversight agency bears responsibility for, you know, the buck stopping with you. So I would say, if it were me, I would want to be involved closely with both of them.
That's what I thought.
I don't know if I want to say sorry or yay to that. Any other questions or comments? So this is being recorded, and the last one was recorded as well, and I have a link that I do not have up on the site yet, but that will be in a document that will be in that folder, and we'll have this one available as well for you to either review, or if you know that somebody was not on this one, they'll be able to hear Kim's comments and hear our live interactions. So if there are no other comments, remember our next session will not be on a Monday. The administrator's webinar is the Monday in 2 weeks, so we've changed the date from Monday at 10 o'clock until Wednesday at 10 o'clock. So I'll be chatting with you through our discussion boards. And again, if anything comes up, I believe all have my email address. It's in the assignments section as well. Please do not hesitate to send me an email about any concerns that you have. So thank you for your attention, and we'll talk soon. Bye.